The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Harrison Industries, casting golden rectangles across the polished marble floor. Emily Carter stood in the lobby, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, trying to steady her breathing. The building seemed to stretch endlessly upward, all glass and steel and success. Everything her father's small construction company had never been. She wore a lavender blouse tied at the waist and her best white skirt, an outfit she'd chosen carefully that morning. She wanted to look presentable, dignified. After all, she was here to face the consequences of her father's mistakes. The receptionist had made a call. Now Emily waited, her heart beating steadily in her chest like a drum, counting down to something inevitable. Her father, Thomas Carter, had borrowed money from Harrison Industries 2 years ago. The loan was supposed to save his struggling business, to pay his workers, to keep everything afloat just a little longer. But construction jobs had dried up, clients had disappeared, and the debt had grown like a shadow, long and dark and inescapable. 3 months ago, her father had suffered a stroke. He lay now in a rehabilitation center, relearning how to speak clearly, how to use his right hand. The medical bills had piled up alongside the business debt. Emily had taken a leave from her teaching job to care for him, to manage what remained of his affairs. And that's when she'd found the letters. Polite at first, then firmer. Final notices from Harrison Industries. The debt totaled $47,000, a sum that might as well have been $1 million. Emily had no way to pay it, but she could at least face it honestly. She could look the CEO in the eye and explain, and perhaps arrange some kind of payment plan, even if it took her the rest of her life. Miss Carter, a woman in a crisp navy suit approached. Mr. Harrison will see you now. Please, follow me. They rode the elevator in silence. Emily watched the numbers climb. 15, 16, 17. Each floor taking her higher into a world she didn't belong to. The executive floor was quiet, elegant. Their footsteps were muffled by thick carpet. The assistant led her to a corner office with a view that seemed to encompass half the city. And there he was. Nathan Harrison stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline. He wore a dark blue suit that fit him perfectly, the jacket slightly open, his white shirt crisp beneath. When he turned to face her, Emily was struck by how young he seemed, perhaps only a few years older than her own 28 years. His expression was unreadable, not cold, but carefully neutral. Miss Carter, he said, his voice smooth and measured. Please sit down. Emily moved to the chair across from his desk, but Nathan didn't sit behind the desk. Instead, he took the chair beside hers, angling it slightly so they faced each other more directly. It was a small gesture, but it changed everything about the dynamic of the room. I assume you're here about your father's debt, he said. Yes. Emily's voice came out steadier than she'd expected. I want you to know that my father never intended to default. He's a good man, an honest man, but his business failed, and then his health failed, and she paused, collecting herself. I can't pay the full amount, but I can work out a payment plan. I can give you a portion of my salary every month. It might take years, but I promise you, I will pay back every cent. Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her with dark, thoughtful eyes. The silence stretched out, and Emily felt her composure beginning to crack. She'd prepared for anger, for coldness, for a businessman's ruthless dismissal. But this quiet attention was somehow harder to bear. Your father worked with my father, Nathan said finally. Did you know that? Emily blinked. No, I didn't. 20 years ago, my father was building Harrison Industries from almost nothing. Your father's company did the concrete work for our first major project, an office complex downtown. The job came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Nathan smiled slightly, the first real expression she'd seen on his face. My father talked about Thomas Carter for years afterward. Said he was one of the few contractors who kept his word. Emily felt tears pricking at her eyes. She blinked them back. When your father applied for the loan 2 years ago, I approved it personally, Nathan continued. Not because of the business plan, though it was solid enough, but because of that history. Because I believe in honoring the relationships that built this company. Then I'm even more ashamed that he couldn't repay you, Emily said quietly. Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Miss Carter, Emily, do you know what the hardest part of running a company is? She shook her head. It's remembering that behind every number in a ledger, there's a person, a life, a story. He paused. I've read the reports about your father's stroke. I know about the medical expenses. I know you left your teaching position to care for him. Emily's throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to know these details, to have looked beyond the simple fact of unpaid debt. I'm going to tell you something, Nathan said, his voice gentler now. That loan was never meant to burden your father, and it's certainly not meant to burden you. Harrison Industries absorbed that debt 6 weeks ago. Your father owes us nothing, and neither do you. The words didn't make sense at first. Emily stared at him, trying to process what she'd heard. What? The debt is forgiven. Cleared from our books. You're free from it. But, you can't just. Emily struggled to form a complete sentence. Relief and confusion washed over her in waves. Why would you do that? Nathan stood, walking back to the window. The late afternoon light caught the lines of his profile, and for a moment, he looked almost lonely despite standing in his own empire. Because my father built this company on the backs of good people like your father, he said. And because I've learned that some debts aren't meant to be collected. They're meant to be honored in different ways. He turned back to her, and now there was a warmth in his expression that transformed his entire face. But I do have one request. Emily stood as well, her legs unsteady. Anything. Have dinner with me, Nathan said. Not as a debtor and creditor, just as two people. I'd like to hear about your father, about his work, about the man who helped build this company's foundation. And I'd like to get to know his daughter, who clearly inherited his integrity. Emily felt a smile breaking across her face, genuine and surprised. You're asking me to dinner? I am. Nathan smiled back, and it was a remarkable smile, full of unexpected kindness. You owe me nothing but that. And only if you'd like to. Standing there in that high office, with the city spreading out beneath them and the weight of impossible debt suddenly lifted, Emily felt something shift inside her chest. Not just relief, though that was there, but something warmer. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of something she hadn't expected to find. I'd like that very much, she said. And in that moment, the afternoon sun seemed to shine a little brighter through those tall windows, illuminating not an ending, but a beginning. Neither of them had planned. At Retriclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.